Thank you for coming to our panel. Thank you so much. I am Matthew Glenn. I'm one of the co-founders at Daydream. You can see my wonderful face over there, over here. I'm often very quiet with the mic, so if at any point you guys cannot hear me, just like do this thing. It's not rude. It would help me. So I'd appreciate it. Yeah, Matthew Glenn, pronounced he, him, co-founder of Daydream, and this is.
Hi, I'm Alana Lanier. Alana rhymes with banana if you have an American accent. If you don't, it does not. I'm the founder of Toadhouse Games and Team Toadhouse. We're a visual novel indie game studio. We are making Call Me Sarah, which is C-E-R-A, which is wishlistable on Steam. And you can find me there. I'm Thai boy. I'm also the person who ran the Palestinian itch bundle last year that made $1 million for Palestinian aid.
Hi, I'm Monica Fan. I am a social game designer at Schell Game. I'm also the project lead of a queer inclusive dating sim called Rainbow Hunter, where you can follow us on Twitter at Rainbow Hunter Game.
So our panel is about making mistakes and learning from them as indie developers. Often some of the best ways to get experience is trying something and messing up like really bad and embarrassing ways. So first we're going to start off with like sort of how we all got into games. I'll start with myself. So I've always loved games, but I didn't really know how to make them until we just sort of tried it. Doing game jams, making smaller projects was sort of my entry into it. And over the past few years, like we've tried things from like multiplayer platformers to a simulation of systemic racism using the Unreal Engine, and now we're working on our first like 3D like game, and it's sort of surprising and scary and exciting. But we've also like made a lot of mistakes along the way. Let me go ahead with your next.
Sure. I was an actor until I realized in my mid-20s that I was doing it out of habit because I was doing it since I was a kid. So I decided, well, if I could do absolutely anything, what would I do? And I figured, let me try making video games. I love playing them so much. So I also started with game jams and smaller projects, teaching myself. I was on the team for Bendy and the Ink Machine, which if you remember that game, it kind of went viral. So that was a year's crash course in how the game industry works. And then after that, I took everything I learned, good, bad, and ugly, and I made Toadhouse Games. And now we make lovely, wholesome visual novels for people with mental illness.
I had a kind of different story. Like I have experience working in films, TVs, and radio, but game was never like something on my radar, and I didn't even know you can make money making game. I thought I used to do that. I started game dev during the Flash era, where you just like make games and post it on website and hope someone see it. And sometimes people will be like, "Good job," and you're like, "That's the best rewards I have." What really makes me start doing this is actually I had a concussion where I bed rest for a year, and everything like my life plan kind of fall apart because of that. And I started using video game as a way to help me rehab and recover from the concussion. And so to me, that's when I start to like really focus on like want to get a career in video game. And I feel like I own the life I have right now to video game. Without video game, I'm not able to like being a functional human, because at the time a lot of doctor was like, we don't know if you'll ever be able to recover. So because of that, I end up like spend like 4 or 5 years like work my way, like get a degree in game design and like work my way into like game industry until like right now I'm lucky enough to have like a full-time job and be able to make a living making video games.
A lot of like disparate paths, I guess, into this industry. As I talk to more people in this industry, like no one really comes at it in the same way, and it's sort of exciting to find out more about how people get into it. As far as like ways to, I guess, make mistakes. Mistakes are sort of expensive sometimes. It can like lead to you spending a lot of extra money, like a budget, or like being delayed really quickly. One way that I like to make mistakes, or let's call them experiments, is like trying like smaller things. So often like there's this thing, like I mentioned earlier, game jams as an opportunity to like sort of try something smaller and like sort of attempt something that might not actually pan out, but you tried it and you learned about it. One of the projects that like we attempted was I guess our first like Unreal projects. We hadn't never used the engine before, and it didn't really turn out as expected. Like we wanted to make it like sort of multiplayer, and we didn't really know how like the input system was going to work. And it was like during like a short weekend, and the game functionally worked, but like the amount of time we would have had to spend if we actually tried to build it out into a larger project, I don't think would have like actually worked out in our end. But we were able to try it and learn, and like now we're using those same systems that we learned earlier one of our current games, like for our input system. Do you have any examples for other smaller projects that?
Well, everything that you learn from your smaller projects then builds up on your larger projects.
Yeah.
So when we didn't get funding for Call Me Sarah, I made the vignettes. So you can play the vignettes now.
They're really good.
Thank you. It's a Good Looking Home Cooking, which is like nominated for a whole bunch of things I'm really proud of. It's about two best friends running a food truck during Ramadan, and Roll for Confidence, which takes place in an arcade and has tabletop RPG, so if you're into that, please. But they use the same art assets and music assets from Call Me Sarah, so I was able to reuse it with some added, so it was like minimal cost. To pump, and they're hour-long games, they're shorter games. So we were able to make those and then use that to fund the bigger game. But when we were, like if you look at the code for Good Looking Home Cooking, it's practically embarrassing. It works, but it's the first thing that I coded. Exactly, it works, so who cares? But it's Call Me Sarah, like I coded a bunch, like when we were working on that. And so I put that game aside and worked on the vignettes. And then when I went back to Call Me Sarah, I spent a month or two just fixing, because I learned so much doing the smaller games.
Yeah.
That I was like looking at it, it was like, why did I spend 60 lines to do this thing I can do in 3 lines now? Like, let me fix this so it's a more efficient game. But you definitely, the smaller things help you. They're not even mistakes. You learn.
Yeah.
You learn, and then your bigger projects are better.
Yeah, it's a great feeling as a programmer to see a bunch of code that you wrote and then like realize, oh, I was an idiot. There's a better way to write that. Like deleting code as a programmer is a beautiful feeling because you're realizing that like you have gotten better over time.
Yeah.
And like your practice and progress has like made your code and your work better.
Also, it's nice to see how creative you were.
Yeah.
Like, that is a creative workaround. When you're reading this code and you're like, yeah, that is one way to do that. That is a choice.
I think that applied for game design too, because recently I had to review some of the stuff I designed a year ago, and I was like, it wasn't like, it's overly complicated.
Yeah.
It's not as good as I remembered it is. But like, I was lucky enough to go back and refine my design because of the stuff I've learned over smaller projects.
Yeah.
And yes, but like, I also have a story about like game jam. The mistake I've learned is never ever you are always likely to underestimate the work you need than like overestimate, because a lot of time you'll be like, oh, we can make a platformer game with just one artist in like a weekend, and technically you are able to do this, but that artist is gonna work their ass off. And then I also have a project where I work with a programmer who's just like really confident and be like, I'm gonna make a custom engine for this like weekend like game jam stuff. And it was like one of my first projects, so I didn't realize you should never do this. So I just let them do it, and what happened is after 2 days, they haven't finished the engine. So we weren't able to finish the game because the custom engine. So like right now, if anyone be like, I'm gonna write a custom engine, like not during game jam.
Yeah.
Do not do that. Like, yeah.
I would also ask why.
That's a very good question. It's like, now I know, like, when people like say, I'm gonna do this, I'm like, why do you want to do this?
Yeah,
like,
why?
communication is very important, but that's like also another thing I didn't know when I first started is I'm not a great programmer, so when a programmer come to me and be like, I can do this, I'm just be like, sure, thank you. Because I didn't know like what does that like how much work it is and how difficult it is, and it doesn't occur to me that I need to do my own research and have a thorough discussion with them about whether it's a wise choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something you just learn over time by doing it. Like one of the things that we did in our first game jam is we would work really hard, and the game wasn't playable until like really late in the process. And that's great if you want to like ship a thing, but you don't really get to test it and iterate on it, and especially let everyone on the team play with it. Someone who did the art is now waiting for the programmer to like build the project and they can't play it. So something that we introduced is a basically continuous integration pipeline for our game jams, so that like we can build the game as we're making it, and every member of the team can have access to that build and like play it while they're going through it. So that there's more iteration, there's more feedback that we're getting because we've done it before, and we just keep on doing it over and over again, and that transfers into our actual project where we have a continuous integration pipeline for that. So it's great just to try these things, learn, and just like get better, and use that to like, I guess, get more information back into. So, as far as we talked briefly about like working with teams, what mistakes have you all made in relation to like collaboration in teams as well as like hiring?
I wouldn't call them mistakes. I would say that I learned a lot because I try to hire people who are new to the industry, because it's very difficult to get that first credit on your resume, which is great. And most of the time, 90% of the time, I'm delighted. That 2% of the time, it's honestly on me. I need to learn. I need a producer, is what I mean, really. I need someone else to learn me how to handle different people's temperaments. But that 2% of the time, it's that I know something so well that I assume it's common knowledge to a person who's new, and I forget that they don't, and that's totally on me. So, for example, I was working with an artist who would give me a piece of art. I'd be like, great, I'll get back to you. I'd play test it. A week later, I'd be like, they loved this, they do this, can we make it purple instead of blue? Or like something simple, right? And they were like, I thought it was done, and they get very, one, their ego was in it, and two, it was also like, you said it was done. I was like, well, games are never done until they're shipped, sweetheart. Like, we need to play test it. This is part of it. And it wasn't until I explained it, like, well, you didn't tell me that. I was like, I didn't know you didn't know. I'm so sorry. I should have said it, because it's true. They were right. I didn't tell them. I didn't say, okay, so now I'm going to do this. It's on me. I hire new people, so I have to explain what I'm going to do next, and totally on me. So I did get better at doing that in the future, but it was really frustrating because they would get so angry and upset with me. And I was like, I don't know where this energy is coming from. I don't even know what to do with this. Why are you screaming at me? I do not understand why you are so upset over something that is par for the course for this industry. And then I remembered I hired someone who never did this before. Oops.
One thing I've learned a lot is it's always, like, it may not always be true, but for me, I'd rather work with someone with less experience and skill, but doesn't have a lot of ego, than work with someone who has a lot of ego, come with a lot of experience and skill, because game development is, first, it's a marathon. It's a very long journey. You have to work together. You have to like tolerate each other for a long time. And then also, like, it's like no game will ever be made without teamwork. So like I used to really chasing the people who, like, I have like 5 years, 10 years of AAA experience. I'm like the spokesperson in like this place and that place. And then I realized, especially because like me as a woman of color, like when I work with some people with a lot of ego, I don't really, there's like a lot of baggage come with, and so my experience is always be like, if you work with some, like when I hire people, the most important thing is always like if their ego is bigger than themselves and their personality, because teamwork ability is more important for a game long-term success than like any like how much experience on C++ you have.
I assume by ego you mean the same thing as what I think ego is, which is that they take critique personally.
Yes, they think they know everything, and they do not want to try, or like do not want to like open to discussion about like what's the alternative. And because I'm the type of person, whenever I plan stuff, I always have like plan A, B, C, because things, that's another thing about game development, is everything is unpredictable, and a lot of times things just doesn't work, and you have to have a plan B. So when I work with people who really insist on plan A is the only way, if it doesn't work, the whole thing fail, it's really hard for like to like have a good team, and also it's gonna influence the moral of other team member who is like who are really nice people, but they just because of this, like if one person has too much a personality, it will make other people lose hope and lose passion, and which would like if game development makes you suffer, I think there's something is wrong.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've learned is if you have a good team, when someone critiques something, it's because they want the game to be better. They're trying to find ways to like introduce that, and it's difficult sometimes. Like when you like say like I think that your art is crap. Like that's a hard thing to say to someone that you respect sometimes, but it's something that comes from a place of I want the game to look better. I want the game to feel better, or like the system you implemented is bad and we need to like change it. Like I had this UI system for the game that we're working on, and one of my co-founders was like, this is not readable to people. People don't understand this. And I was like, okay, I worked really hard on this, but he wants me to understand how to make the system better. And we spent time iterating on it and making changes to it. And it took longer than I expected, but we got there because like he was willing to say like we can make a change, and I was willing to say, okay, my current thing doesn't have to be the final version of it.
I think it's important also though to know when to say no to a change.
Yes.
Because, for example, with Call Me Sarah, there's a lot of therapy in it and therapy tools taught.
Yeah.
And during the first therapy session Sarah goes to, the therapist point blank says, I'm not your friend, I'm your therapist.
Yeah.
Which is a very important distinction.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And during playtesting, there were a lot of a certain demographic, white guys, who got very upset about it. And some people on my team were just like, well, we should change it. So I was like, no, it should challenge them. That's the point.
Yeah.
So I had to push back, and they were just like, oh, it's your ego and you're not letting us change. It's like, no, if you see I've changed all of this,
Yeah.
but this I'm not changing, that is the point. I want them to be challenged. So knowing where to be like, no, this I refuse to listen to you on, this is how it is. These, yeah, sure, we'll change this to that or whatever.
Yeah, like that's we have another thing on our game where this is going to get into the weeds on an unannounced video game, so let's get into it a little bit. But essentially, like our game works by showing players like the shadow races of people who are online, and we've had like a long conversation about like when should we show that, after the player completed a level or before the player completes the level. I was on the side of like we should do it before so we can show them how like the networking stuff works, and they're super excited into it, but that sort of destroys them learning how a level works. And I was wrong on that. Like I think that like the implementation that like my co-founder says like doing it afterwards is the right call, because it lets players get used to this level and learn about it, and I guess focus on playing rather than focus on like following someone else. And like I think that is the absolute right call. I was very incorrect on that. We sort of got into direction stuff, but I think I'm going to push this question up to the front. What experiences do y'all have with scope mistakes?
I think I have a story about like combine like the stuff you just said, is how to take take feedback from like players and playtesters, and because I used to be a community manager for a game, and sorry, we had a very dedicated player. And if you're like in game a lot of game community Discord, you'll realize there's so many suggestions, and everyone who play a game will give you like a lot of suggestions, be like, this is what you should do, what you should like improve. And the project I was working on, we did not really have like a very good system about like how are we gonna take feedback and what feedback should we take. And there's one thing a lot of like senior designer has told me is always listen to player about what the question is, but be very careful taking their suggestion about how to fix it. Yeah. And that's like a lesson we learned, because what happened is we did not filter all the suggestions very carefully, and we were like at a team that is, it was an early access game, so we were very reactionary, so whenever a player has a suggestion, we'll be like, okay, we'll do this, and then we'll like have a patch, which is like, on one hand it's really good because it made the community feel heard, but on the other hand is we have wasted a lot of time of going back and forth, because one person like will be like, you should do this, and then we patch it, and then all the players will be like, that's a horrible suggestion. Why do you change this? I'm angry. And so like it is like something I had to learn is one thing is a lot of suggestions you get are from the vocal minority, not necessarily a representation of the whole player base. On the other hand, is whenever they say, they will tell you you should do this, and the question is always, why do you think I should do this? What is the issue you are running into? What are the problem, what are the frustration you have with this game? And then once you understand where they come from, you understand why do they have those frustrations. It's about like taking your best judgment based on your experience, because you're the game developer. You're the one who knows how the inner system works. And then decide whether or not you should take their suggestion or whether or not we should. Sometimes they will say like, there's like when their system is broken, and then we realize it's because it's not the system is broken, but because the language we use are very confusing. So it's all about like trying to tackle, trying to investigate, and see what is like the best way to fix the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So another question that we have, I guess, is, do you have any experience like in relation to like being naive in this industry and like maybe sort of being taken advantage of in your work, or sort of line this up for someone in particular?
Go for it, Monica.
Yeah.
I had a really crazy experience because when I was first in grad school, I really, really, really wanted to be part of the game industry, and I would take any opportunities. And so like, I don't know how many, like I think there's like some of you guys are also really want to get into the game industry. And one thing I learned is I was taking like a lot of unpaid internship, which is not necessarily, it's like, first of all, you deserve to be paid for your work.
Yes.
Absolutely. But if you take unpaid internship, be very careful and investigate the company you're working for. Make sure you are taking enough out of it. Because my experience is I was like an unpaid designer in this company, and then like my understanding is I'm gonna work with senior designer, I'm gonna learn from like how the studio is working, like all those stuff. And then when I get there, I realized the whole company is basically one guy who posted a bunch of like unpaid internship job, and then like have a bunch of like people with no experience, and then put them in a Slack group and be like, make a game for me, make a AAA MMO for me. And as you can guess, there's no game came out of it.
No.
I'm shocked.
But I also have like another weird experience where I was like, my first job, I was working as a QA, and for this free to play ad revenue game. And then like I feel something wrong because the game is really bad, like really, really bad. Like it's like asset flood is better. And then I realized their business revenue is they hire a lot of students to be QA, and what the QA actually do is to watch the ads. So every day I have to watch 100 ads and record them and write them down. And until one day it clicked to me, that's how the company makes money. So yeah, be very careful when you like look for opportunities. Do your research. Don't be me.
That is brazen to attempt that.
I've never heard that story before. That's amazing.
I'm wondering like how many other companies also do that.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what other mistakes have you made in relation to things that aren't actually making a video game, like not like programming or doing art or designing it, like the networking and like taxes and accounting and like legal stuff?
I think the most painful mistake I've made was when I went out for funding. I did everything wrong, and we didn't get funding. So part of it is on me. Part of it is that I made a static, like a Clannad classic type visual novel with no, it's not like a Necrobarista, it's a classic visual novel with no animations, story focused about a female protagonist who goes to therapy and makes friends. So I didn't get money. money. So part of it was that. Part of it was factors around that. But part of it was that I got really bad advice because it was my first time pitching for funding. And I listened to all the bad advice. And I don't even know how to begin. I asked for more money. It was like how I explained it yesterday when people were asking me, like, well, what do you mean? So, for example, one pitch meeting, I went in and I was asking for production, so not for marketing, for anything, for $75K. That would be for the music, the art, etc. To make the full visual novel that I wanted to make with all the different features, etc., etc. And I really spent a lot of time coming up with that number. That is honestly how much the game costs. That's how much I'm going to now have to pay for it. That's how much we needed to create this game. I was told by a well-meaning person who really wanted me to get money that I will be laughed out the room if I ask for anything less than $200K. But it's basically the way that they came to one of the pitch meetings with me. I don't know why I agreed to this, but they came to one of the pitch meetings with me.
We're learning.
And I had my presentation, I was asking for the $75K because that's all we needed, and I didn't want to ask for more because then it comes to stipulations and funding's a whole different story. And this person, mid-meeting, interrupts me and goes, oh, excuse me, no, I've seen her game. No, she's wrong. She doesn't need 75K, she needs 250K. And then she texts me, like, see, I got you another 175K. I was like, no, you didn't, because they said no. They didn't say it. No, money is not. You earned it. And they were so well-meaning. It was just bad advice. Because they were treating it was basically like if I wanted to go in and do like a traditional Mario platformer, like 2D, like arcade style. And she was like, no, we can make Mario 64 if you give her $2 million. Like, that's not the game I was making, that's not the pitch I was doing, that's not what they were expecting. And I should not have listened to that advice. But I was young and naive, and I didn't want to be seen as like this stupid girl going in. It's already hard being a girl going in for pitching. It's a room full of men in suits is intimidating. And so to go in and have my little, it's a game about friendship, and it's a female protagonist, and it teaches therapy, and you'll love it. And it's intimidating. And so I took the bad advice of you need to at least do 200K. The good advice, there's tons, but with that particular thing, is make sure that the people you're pitching to, what they normally fund is within what you need. So, for example, I think Calvin Knight's, I think their bottom is $500,000?
I think so, yeah.
Something like that. So I wouldn't pitch to them, well, I would never say never, but like they wouldn't necessarily be someone I pitch to because they don't do smaller budget things. Meanwhile, Wings is female-led and usually does smaller budgets, so they're perfect. So find the pitching and publishing, etc. Find the people with the money that makes sense for you. Don't do what I did. It was bad, it was so bad.
Yeah, I think I have like a lot of similar experience I had a lot of friends who has like a lot of AAA experience, and when I first I was like, oh, you like Blizzard, you work at like, you work on Tomb Raiders, you work on like Ratchet and Clank, you must know everything about how to make a video game and how to get funding. And then it turns out there's a huge difference between how AAA does pitching and funding. That does not really apply when I'm making like a queer inclusive dating sim about hunting pretty men. That I didn't know because I talked to like a lot of, they will introduce you, they're like, you should talk to this person, and I talk to them, and I was like, how do I market my game? And they just look at me shocked, and they just don't know because like even like a lot of people be like, I'm a very experienced game marketer, but they do not really have experience marketing for like an LGBTQ community, marketing for like women and adult women, and because these are not traditionally gamers, like when you like talking about marketing games, like we have improved a lot in the past couple of decades, but still there's this assumption is like, oh, we're marketing towards teenage boys or men who is like adult men but still like think like a teenage boy. But so like I got a lot of advice, I did a lot of stuff which was not really, one is not very helpful, and the other is like it really like hurts my moral because I was like, oh, I listened to all the advice and I did all those, but nothing came out of it, and I just started questioning, am I really made to do this? So like it is like when you take advice, like it's sometimes it's like where do they come from? And just because someone who has 20 years experience working in AAA does not mean they are the best mentor for your like niche indie game.
And you know your game better than anyone else.
Yes.
So I was told by one marketing publishing people, we love the game, it's wonderful, it's great, but can we not mention the therapy aspect that's really risky when we pitch, like when we market it? It's like, one, that's not truthful, and two, that's literally the game. So you're taking out the core gameplay concept. What's left? Like, it's not a romance sim, it's about friendship. So what would you like to say about it? And they were like, well, it's this pretty wholesome word. And it's like, no, it's crunchy wholesome. I mean, in Good Looking and Cooking, there's self-harm. Like, what are you trying to say? Do you not even play the game? You do have to find people who get it.
Yeah.
And typically, it's not going to be the mainstream. If you're making like an LGBT or something, it's not going to be the mainstream formula. And then that's more challenging. Then you do question yourself. Like, I did everything that I was supposed to, and everyone laughed in my face and told me I was a failure. I'm going to go cry now. What do we do?
Yeah, I think one thing to think about when getting advice is it's free, but it's also coming from the perspective of that person. Like that person might be like, I make hardcore first-person shooters, and I'm going to give you advice on like your like queer dating game or
Right.
queer like therapy game. Like the way that you handle that, like you have to understand like the perspective that they're coming from. Like their experience is not experience that might even be relevant to you. And there's a degree of people sometimes like doing that to like sort of sabotage or change the game into something else. Like I don't know how they sell your game without mentioning the therapy. I don't know how that works exactly.
They obviously didn't get it.
But I think it's also just them not being equipped because they don't have the experience to do the job that you are trying to do.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that anything that you're doing is wrong. So
Yeah, but when you're in it, it's hard to remember that.
yeah, it's difficult.
Especially because at the time I didn't have the money to. We didn't make anything yet, so it's not like I owed the money yet. But
Yeah.
still, I had artists and musicians and people that I wanted to pay, and I wanted to pay them fairly, and I wanted to do the right thing, and I wanted to, like when you have people other than you that you want to give money to, and they're telling you like, no, you can't do that. Be like, but I need that because my artist deserves that. I need that because my musician deserves that. And I won't get paid. I don't care. Like I haven't yet to make a dime from it. That's not something good, but that's because I'm learning. But my musician was paid well. My artists were paid well. My playtesters, everyone who worked on it, like they were fairly compensated. And I'm just hoping that buy my game, please, so that I can be paid for this when it comes out later. But that was what I came up with. I came up with not paying myself, making sure everyone else got what I could, getting a second job, and then the vignettes.
Yeah.
The vignettes pumped money because the vignettes did well. Good Looking and Cooking did really well. And that's what paid for the music and the art in commissary. So you just get creative, but it's really hard when you're in it because you start to take it personally. It's really hard. It's heartbreaking. Just so you know, funding is like, take care of yourself because that mental slope is like, it's real hard.
This is a fun one I think is a little relevant. Like, are there things that you should maybe look out for as far as like in contracts and like vibes you get when you're meeting with people about like contracts?
If you create it, you should own it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Also
It's not all
like,
games. Like that's not all publishers and that's not all games. It's unfortunate in this industry, but like that is like it seems like there's a lot of contracts that do not fall under that. But I want to own the games that we create, and it's difficult to find contracts that also.
And you should have a say on how they spend the money. So if a publisher says, well, we'll do the marketing and it will be part of the blah, blah, blah. Well, what if they then want to spend double what you were planning on spending on marketing and now you owe them that money? Also, your contract usually for indies, the publisher gets paid before you see a dime. So do you have the money to do that? Do you have the time to do that? I have a lot about contracts. I ended up not going with the publisher, not even because of the funding thing, but because I wasn't happy with any contract I saw. So I'm jaded, you tell.
to me, it's always because the stuff we do, not only like contract, but also when we bring out like members or hiring people, the most important thing is the values aligned. Like to me, it's very important our game is inclusive, it's safe, it's not discriminatory, and it doesn't like provoke like a lot of harmful stereotype. So like to me, when I look for like contract publishers and stuff, it's all about like is the value aligned? Are they gonna appreciate for the advantage we have? And also like creative control to me is very important because I have been through a few projects where we lose creative control by the publisher and then end up the game goes nowhere, and then one day the publisher just be like, you know what, I'm gonna cancel the project.
Yeah.
Like, and the whole studio is gone, nobody's getting paid, and like all the work is now just, I don't even know where all those like all the assets is. I guess somewhere in the cloud or somewhere. I don't like it's like, and so like it's always important like you have the creative control or your values align and work with someone you feel comfortable to advocate for yourself.
A contract should be mutual. It shouldn't just be protecting them about what they get. You should also see what they owe you, when they owe it to you, if they break the contract, what happens. If they do something that you're not cool with, who do you talk to? It should protect you as much as it protects them. And if it feels like it's in their favor, first of all, lawyers should always read your contracts, but second of all,
Read a contract.
because there's a lot of legalese and a lot of definitions that maybe you think you understand it, but in layman's terms, that's not necessarily the legal definition, and you can get caught up. It's kind of like a prenup, right? You want to make a prenup when you still are in love, because then it's going to be nice, and you'll agree on it, and it will be fair. And then if you try to make a prenup, it wouldn't be a prenup, it would just be divorce at that point. That's when it gets ugly, when you don't have it written when you're still in love. So while you're still lovey-dovey with whoever you're making the contract with, make sure you're both happy with it, really understand it, talk through it, make sure they understand it. And I would say most important lesson that I learned very early on is even if you're working with your best friend for life, have a contract. It doesn't matter who they are, your sister, your brother, your parents, I don't care who they are to you. Write a contract. It can be a simple one sheet of like, this person and this person agree to do this by this day for this amount of money. It could be like for a pizza. I owe them one large pizza from Sorrento's because they are making me 4 Sprites by March 1st. They will submit it to my Google Drive. There's the date. We both sign it. Best friends for life. And also, if you make it honestly, because it's legal, because then if they don't, you could be like, hey buddy, remember that thing you signed? And then if you are making invoices and you are doing things for free, always submit an invoice, even if it's your best friend and you're doing it for free and your best make an invoice, and at the very end, write friend discount, 100%. That way they know how much you're actually worth. That way they know that you're getting $4,000 worth of what you normally, if you were Ubisoft and they approached you and you would ask for this amount, you put that on the invoice and then you give that to your friend with a 100% friend discount, because it's great during that honeymoon phase. But if your game goes viral, or if that game starts making money, or if someone gets a bee in their bonnet, or if things get weird, which it tends to do, it sounds ugly, I'm sorry, but just be smart, protect yourself, do it while you're both in love.
And also just during that process, like as you're working on the game, check in with them, make sure they're on the same page, and the expectations are being met, like time-wise, like work-wise, asset-wise, like make sure that people are on the same page, because a lot of, I think, fights come out of misunderstandings.
And
miscommunications. So
yeah, before deadlines, like a week beforehand, have you, or if you have a producer, have them reach out to whoever it is and be like, hey, things due in a week, just making sure, do you need anything? You know, do a little check-in and say, hey, it's due tomorrow. I'm sure you're on top of it, but just checking in, do you need anything? Will we be on time? Yeah, deadlines are hard, especially if you're indie. Just communication. And then if you're on the other side, if you have this anxiety that it's due and you thought you were due it, but it's nowhere near done, it is worse for you to wait for that deadline to pass, ghost the person, and not say anything out of that anxiety dread, than to message them and be like, hey buddy, I messed up. I thought I'd have it done. I'm sorry. I need another week. Or like, I don't even know how long, or this is too much, or I bit off more than I can chew. Communicate, because I've lost friends over stupid stuff like this.
Yeah, I have a issue with one of our programmer just fell off just MIA for like a whole month, and that was extremely anxious. And later he told me like there's issues like happens with him that he's not able to work on game, which to me is like, as a project lead, I am the one who is responsible for risk control. And I understand that if like something happens, you are not able to work on this project. But please, 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 just send me a one sentence message, because I'm worried like if his safety, if he's still alive, or like, I don't know, like anything could happen. But also it's like, because like when we know, okay, we need a new programmer, we can always look for people and stuff. But when we don't know what's going on, it's really bad. It's very stress inducing, and it makes like other people on the team be like, is the project in jeopardy? Or like, are we gonna like in trouble because someone hasn't like replied for like a whole month? So one thing I've learned is we have like a whole team meeting every month. Like every month we'll check in, and every week we have like one-on-one check-in. It doesn't mean like, oh, you have to like finish like so many stuff by this week, but to me it's important to just check in with each person to make sure everyone is like healthy, they feel good, they feel productive, they can still do the work, or if they couldn't, we can like come up with a plan. And just understand like your team lead, they are okay, they are ready to accept any answer if you like need to take a break or anything. One thing I keep telling everyone on my team is, if you need to take a break, just let me know. And like, because again, game dev is a very long journey. It's sometimes you just need to take a break, sometimes you just want to step away from computer and like embrace the nature, and it's totally fine as long as you communicate.
And I think that's the next topic is like, how do you avoid feeling burnt out? Like, what are you doing to make sure that you can still continue to do this sustainably and you don't go crazy?
So my number one first lesson with that, because I'm specifically in a crunch studio, like very passionate about that, is I would have an artist and they'd be like, oh, don't worry about it, I can do it in the afternoon. I'd be like, great, so you have a week. And then the day before, of course, they didn't have it done because life happens. And I would have a conversation. Part of this is on me because I saw the pattern and I ignored it. So I should have let this person go, but whatever. I wanted so badly for it to work out. But the pattern was they'd ghost on the deadline day, they'd be gone for 2 days, they'd have a reason, and then I would be like, stretch goal, 2 weeks. So then I learned they need about 2 weeks, and then they'll ghost me for 3 days. And I basically built their pattern into our production schedule. Don't do that. Just get another person.
Please don't do that, guys.
Man, that's painful. It's over now. It's fine. I learned. But it's. I forget the original point. I just got really upset about remembering
that. Traumatic experience. It was a lot.
What were we talking about?
As far as burnout.
So take breaks when you need, and if you feel yourself being pessimistic about the project, that's usually the first sign of burnout. So after the Palestinian bundle, it was a beautiful thing that happened, but it was a surprise. It wasn't planned to be that big. I thought I'd make $500. So when all of a sudden I went to sleep and I woke up to thousands of devs signing up for it, it was just me. I was overwhelmed. And of course, then eventually I got tons of volunteers and loads of help, and it was a group project, and I'm not trying to get credit for it. But as the person who was running it, and I was playing catch up the whole time, plus, hate mail and all the stuff that comes with doing good things for people. I got burnt out from it. I was a mess. So I took 2 months off to kind of just like purposely do nothing. I just went for walks, and I was able to do that because I run my own studio. It was a luxury. Of course, then the next month I got pregnant, now I'm behind schedule again. But if you can take breaks, do. If you can communicate to your project lead you need a break. And there's no personal failure if you go, I need help on this. It would have been so much better for that artist I was talking about if they were just like, hey, this is more than I thought I could take. Could we have another artist? Could we get someone? I would have found the funds. I would have found a way to bring someone else on, an assistant, something. But I'm not a mind reader, so you have to communicate what you need. And even if you're not sure what you need, you can contact a person, especially if it's like, Monica and I do LGBT and neurodiverse, like weird stuff, like if it's people who are very open to neurodiverse and inclusivity and like want to make a safe place, and you as well, of course, I didn't mean to exclude you as I'm talking about inclusivity. Like, you have to communicate what you need even if you don't know what that is, even if it's a message going like, I noticed the pattern myself that I miss every deadline, let's talk about it. It's better to have that horrible, anxious, ugly meeting early so that we're both on the same page than me chasing you and then losing a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I have a thing, the thing I do avoid burnout, which I've learned in grad school is, every week, Saturday is the day I do not work. I do not answer work, like I do not answer message, I do not do like an email or anything, like I just have one day where all I do is relax and do whatever fun I want to do, because to me it's very, very important to like, it's being an indie dev, you have a tendency, and it's like very, very, very desiring, is be like, I have nothing else to do this weekend. I could catch up on stuff. I could do stuff ahead, and my next week will be easier. Your next week will never be easier because there will be new stuff coming up. I learned this very hard way. Is the idea is like my next week will be easier if I work harder this week. It's rarely happened because like you always have new stuff you can do, and so to me it's important like have one day a week where I'm just block out, I don't do anything work related. But also like when it comes to team members, I usually will assign tasks in like you said, stretch goal. I'll be like, okay, these are this is a small chunk of stuff you should do this week. If you have time, here are the stuff you can do. If you don't have time, don't worry about it. We can wait until next week. So like I always make sure like give them like a tier of priority of task rather than be like, here is 10 stuff you have to do this week. So people can like, because like it's the trust, like find team members you can trust and then trust them being able to like task manage and manage their own life. And so I find that to be very helpful to preventing burnout.
Yeah, like building a team that you trust, that you work together, like is invaluable. Like I have a bunch of like projects that start and stop, but like once we found a team that like worked, like it's great because like you understand like other people's tells a little bit, and you can also like get a better understanding of like when people are overworking themselves. Like we came out of doing game jams, which are not a sustainable way to make video games. Like making a game over a weekend, spending the entire weekend just cramming on a video game. Don't do that. You can't do that forever. It's great for a weekend. But doing it like every weekend, no, don't do that, especially if you have day jobs. So we had to find ways to make sure that we're working in a sustainable way where we're not pressuring each other to get stuff in and done. And there's part of it is like the stuff that you do to yourself where you want to finish something because you're really into it. There's also the expectation and you see other people doing it saying, oh, I need to do it too because I don't want to get behind. And making sure that you're like just being aware of that and asking like what you're doing time-wise. When you know that someone had like decided to spend a weekend doing something, saying, hey, you're not doing anything this weekend or something, or we just did a game jam the previous weekend, we're skipping work the next week. Like, so just making sure that you're aware of the ways that you're directly contributing to your own crunch, but also to other people's, so that you're not creating an environment that isn't sustainable, because working ridiculous hours forever is not sustainable for anybody. We're near the end, but what is your biggest mistake you can think of, and what did you learn from it?
I think the most painful thing was that month of funding. I'm very grateful for Nelson talking me out of it because I went into a dark place after that funding thing. Yeah, it's over.
It's awesome. Yeah.
He talked me off the ledge. I'm very, very grateful to him. No, the funding thing was the most painful.
To me, my biggest mistake is I read so much game dev stories and watched so much game dev documentary. I really thought if I don't see success right away, that means I'm not made to do this. And what I learned is a lot of stuff, it just takes time, and making a mistake is okay. A mistake is how people learn, and every game dev hero, every person you've seen who's in the spotlight, they have their time making a mistake. They have their time when they're in the dark and doing hard work, doesn't necessarily see something right away. So to me, it's really about understand it's a long, like we're going to have like a very long game dev career, and it's okay to make mistake, and it's okay if you don't see like result right away.
I think for me, it was just not doing any of this sooner, like putting things off and saying, I can work on this another time, or once I've had enough time to plan, or I've read enough documentation for this engine, but like just doing it and attempting it and trying it, I think has been the most valuable thing to me. And like every time I think about like the years I was not doing this when I should have been, like that is I think the biggest mistake for me.
It is hard playing someone else's game. Like when I played Undertale, I was like, oh, I wish I made that.
I have so many games.
Because it's like such a game that's along what I would have made. And it's like, oh, it's a game that I could have made, I would have made, I should have made.
We got a very quick bonus round. So throughout this like PAX, I've been going around to other game developers and people who work in the industry and asking like, what are the biggest mistakes you've made or noticed within the developers? I talked to Able Gamers and was volunteering with them. You guys should check out their booth. But I asked like, what are developers messing up on? And one thing they mentioned was not thinking about accessibility early enough, especially indie gamers, developers. Implementing those features later is going to slow down the speed at which you're.
Can you repeat it?
Can you repeat it? That's
Oh, I'm
what
sorry.
someone asked.
Yeah. With Able Gamers, the not implementing your accessibility features earlier makes it very difficult to implement them later.
Yes.
You might have to make larger changes inside of the game, and that can make it expand your scope and make it difficult to get things completed and done.
Yeah, there was a mini game back when Commissary had mini games. We cut them because they weren't fun. But we had a mini game that wouldn't have been accessible to blind players, and so we cut it. It's a great way to do scope. Just looking at your accessibility and being like, what's actually accessible, what can we do? Yeah, early on.
Yeah, I believe accessibility is a mindset that you should always have. As someone who's like accessibility design, something I really like believe in. It's a mindset. Whenever as a game designer, whenever I design stuff, it's like affordance, accessibility, and whether player fantasy, and these are all the stuff I have to balance. So yeah.
Why wouldn't you want absolutely everyone to be able to play your game?
And another thing is Imposter Syndrome. Everyone has it. I was talking to a developer who's way further in his career than I am and has a lot more experience. And he was like, I feel like an imposter. And I was like, you're not an imposter. Like, I feel like an imposter compared to you. Like, the more people I talk to in the industry, like the more people I meet who feel uncomfortable in their position. So like, in knowing that more and more people are feeling like imposters, it makes it so normal that maybe everyone is sort of in this boat, so no one is really an imposter, and we all belong a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely reassuring to know like almost everyone has imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And I think finally, don't quit making games even after a failure. When the game is not successful, keep doing it, keep going, because your first game is probably going to be crap. Like the second game might also be crap. The third game might be crap, but over time, you're going to get better at it, and you're going to learn, and every time you make a game, like, you're learning ways to make a better game next time. I think we got a little bit of time for questions, so if anyone wants to run up to that mic with a question. Hey, go ahead.
So, I guess what I wanted to ask is whether you feel like the topics of your games, so systemic racism, mental health, and other queerness, whether those have ever negatively impacted your careers.
If they did, I don't care. I care too much about my topics. If people don't like my games and don't want to play my games because they've got mental illness in them, then my games aren't for them.
Yeah.
I have definitely, I personally have experience when I go through interview session and go through the like 3 rounds of design interview. I passed with them, no issue. And I failed because they were like, it's not a good culture fit. Because of the stuff I advocate and because of the stuff I do. And to me, I think they are right. It's not a good culture fit for me to be there. I wouldn't be very happy. So I think, does it negative? Sometimes it does, but maybe it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, this is a PG panel, so I'm not going to say what I would like to say, but if they have a problem with me working on a game about systemic racism, screw them. So, like,
Yeah, you'll never make absolutely everyone happy, so just make sure you're making yourself happy and then you can sleep at night.
That's right.
Of course, thanks for the question.
Hello. I have a question. So what was an issue that you had with your game, whether it's a bug or a feature we're trying to add, and something's wrong with it, but it's not obvious at first, but then when you figure out, it's like, oh, that was completely obvious. I should have known that the first minute I saw it.
I had a bug where one of the sprites would, almost like in a Doki Doki Literature Club, run up to the screen and would be a jump scare. I accidentally didn't comment out like a little zoom. Like I was telling myself to zoom something, but I put it in as like a command instead of a comment, and I didn't notice it until like a good 3 hours past when I should have. It was funny to me once I figured it out. Nice calming game, and then you just see the characters' faces.
Also, one last thing before I go sit down. If you guys ever want to challenge yourself, take the project you're the proudest of and put it to the side. The thing has like 5 CPUs. That's a challenge.
Thank you.
This has been one of the most concrete, grounded panels I've seen, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. I teach tabletop game design and professional writing practice. And I'm so unfamiliar with the business. So I would ask, my question is, will you do a panel for PAX 23 on contracts and giving it to the industry? I would love to see that one.
I suppose we could. I'd have to like sit down and concrete so I don't get too emotional, but yeah, I'll think about it. Also, play Roll for Confidence. It's all tabletop. It's great. You should play it. Not biased at all.
Hi. You talked a lot about team cohesiveness, project management. Do you find there's more efficiency in having one project manager keeping each individual role and team member on task, or having a very cohesive team that has a lot of buy-in and feel like stakeholders?
For our team, it's 4 people, and we all have like sort of areas that we specifically focus on. So I'm working on like a lot of some of the programming and like the story, and someone else is working on the art. If someone has an issue with the story, like they come and bring it to me and we work on it and everything, but I sort of manage that focus, and someone else is working on the art. So we sort of divert it, but that's just how our game and our company is structured. I think there's a variety of different ways to work. It's just as long as like you're shipping stuff and then people aren't going crazy.
Yeah. Also, to me, I think the answer is yes, both.
Yeah.
Having stakeholder is very important. Having people feel ownership is important. However, I have ADHD. I'm not a very good person. I like keeping everything on track. So having a project manager is really helpful. It doesn't mean the project manager shouldn't be like the mom of everybody. You should do this, you should do that. But like a reminder, be like, hey, this is due this day, and these are the stuff we talk about, and these are the things. It's very, very helpful. I don't know what I would do without a project manager.
Thank you.
I think we're at time, but we are cool to answer questions outside in a second. We're just going to do a quick, review of everyone and like where to find us. So I am Matthew Glenn. I'm one of the co-founders for Digital Daydream, and this is
Alana Linaire, Team Toadhouse and Toadhouse Games. You can find us on Steam. You can find us on Mostly Itch. Roll for Confidence, Good Luck at Home Cooking, Commissar, Sarah C.R. like Triceratops, and Tybawai is me on all social platforms.
I'm Monica. You can follow me on Designer Monica on Twitter. You should also follow our game, Evil Hunter Game.
yeah.